In this GlowShift Gauges installation video, we'll be showing you how to install a GlowShift 7-Color Series diesel gauge package into your 2000 to 2006 Duramax. When you're ready, grab your tools and we'll meet you in the garage. For the purpose of this install, we'll be using a 2002 Duramax 6.6 liter to install our gauge package. The additional accessories featured in this install will make installation easier and can be purchased through our website. Start by unboxing your gauges and their accessories. For safety, disconnect the negative battery terminal before starting any work on the vehicle. Remove the air intake to gain access to the intake manifold. Loosen and remove the intercooler coupling attached to the intake manifold. Mark the location for the boost line with a punch. Attach a shop vac to the intake manifold to catch any shavings that fall into the manifold. Starting with a small drill bit, drill a hole in the manifold, increasing the bit size until a size R is reached. Use a 1/8-27 tap to thread the hole. Use a shop vac to clean up any metal shavings. Apply Teflon tape to the boost line adapter and thread it into the hole using a wrench to tighten. Place the female brass fitting onto one end of the boost line, followed by the brass ferrule fitting. Ensure the ferrule fitting is facing upward to prevent any leaks. Connect it to the boost line adapter and tighten. Reattach the intercooler coupling and tighten. To install the EGT sensor, start by removing the passenger side wheel well liner. Use a punch to mark the location on the exhaust manifold where the probe will be installed. Starting with a small drill bit, drill a hole in the manifold, increasing the bit size until a size R is reached. Use a pen magnet to remove any metal shavings that may have fallen into the manifold. Use a 1/8-27 tap to thread the hole. Apply anti-seize to the EGT ferrule fitting, attach it to the manifold, and tighten. Insert the exhaust temperature probe into the bolt and tighten. Route the sensor wire to the top of the engine bay and be sure to keep clear of any moving parts. We'll be using a T-fitting to install the transmission temperature sensor, which can be purchased through our website. To install the transmission temperature sensor, start by marking the location of the T-fitting on the transmission cooler feed line. Measure 1 7/8 inches from the first mark and make a second mark. This will represent the portion of the line that will be removed. Place a drain pan on the floor before removing the line. Use a pick to remove the retaining clip and pull the line out of the transmission, ensuring that any fluid drains into the pan. Using the pipe cutters with a new blade, cut the line at the marks you measured. After both portions of the line have been cut, use a deburring tool to deburr both ends of the line. Use an emery cloth to smooth any sharp edges. Place one side of the fitting onto the line, followed by the cutting ring. Place the T-fitting onto the line, followed by the second cutting ring and end cap, and tighten. Place the line back into the transmission and reinsert the retaining clip. Apply Teflon tape to the transmission sensor and place it into the T-fitting. Tighten the sensor and reposition the T-fitting to allow for easy installation of the wiring. Attach the female silver connector and the longer rubber cover to one end of the green wire from the gauge wiring harness. And connect the white wire from the sensor. Then, attach the male silver connector and short rubber cover to the end of the black wire from the gauge wiring harness, and connect to the black wire from the sensor. Run both wires to the engine bay, making sure to secure them out of the way of any moving parts. If you purchased the gauge package that includes a fuel pressure gauge instead of a transmission temperature gauge, you'll need to ensure the vehicle has an aftermarket lift pump installed before starting installation. On the lift pump assembly, remove the bolt from the fuel pressure sensor port. Thread the sensor into the port and tighten. Connect the sensor harness to the sensor and secure the wire away from moving parts. Run the sensor harness wire to the engine bay. Once all of the sensors have been installed, attach the braided EGT gauge harness wire to the EGT sensor harness wire and route all wires to the firewall on the driver's side. Be sure to secure the wires away from any moving parts. Reinstall the air intake and tighten. Reinstall the wheel well liner if it was removed. Use an open grommet to run all of the wires through the firewall and into the cabin of the vehicle. If you do not have an open grommet, carefully make a hole in an existing grommet and feed the wires into the cabin. Once the wires are pulled through into the cabin, remove the factory A-pillar from the truck. If your truck comes with a speaker in the pillar, you'll need to remove the speaker and place it into the new pod before wiring. Do this by using a screwdriver to remove the speaker from the factory pod. Next, remove the speaker cover and place it into the new pod. Insert the speaker into the pod. Place the factory pillar inside the new pod, ensuring that the hole for the speaker lines up around the speaker. Before wiring the gauges, holes need to be drilled in the factory pillar for the wires to pass through. Do this by placing the gauge pod over the factory pod and drilling the holes from the inside underneath each cup. Use the gauge pod screws to secure the new gauge pod to the factory pillar and place the colored caps over the screws. Start by feeding the wires for the boost gauge through the pod and insert the gauge into the cup. Next, feed the wiring harness for the EGT and transmission temperature gauges through the pod. Using the red wire from the wiring harness, connect all of the red wires together. Using the yellow wire from the wiring harness, connect all of the yellow wires together. Using the orange wire from the wiring harness, connect all of the orange wires together. Using the black wire from the wiring harness, connect all of the black wires together. Use zip ties to clean up the wires. Once the gauge pod has been wired, remove the fuse box cover panel and run all of the wires from the sensors to the pillar. Run the open end of the wires from the gauge pod to the fuse box location. To connect the boost line to the back of the boost gauge, start by applying Teflon tape to the brass fitting on the back of the gauge. Tighten the brass bolt adapter onto the fitting on the gauge. Place the female brass fitting onto one end of the boost line, followed by the brass ferrule fitting. Ensure the ferrule fitting is facing upward to prevent any leaks. Connect it to the boost line adapter and tighten. Insert the remaining connectors into each gauge and place the gauges into the pod. Using a wire connector, connect the green wire from the transmission temperature sensor to the green wire from the connector on the gauge. Secure all wires with zip ties and attach the pod to the pillar. For this installation, we'll be powering the gauges using expandable circuits, which can be purchased through our website. Locate a fuse that receives constant 12-volt power. Remove the fuse and place it into the first expandable circuit. Place the expandable circuit into the fuse's location in the fuse box. Connect the yellow wire from the gauge pod to the expandable circuit using the wire connector on the circuit. Locate a fuse that receives 12-volt power when the ignition is turned on and remove the fuse. Place the fuse into the second expandable circuit and place the circuit into the fuse's location in the fuse box. Insert the red wire from the gauge pod into the open end of the wire connector on the circuit and crimp. Locate a clean, reliable grounding source and attach the ring terminal on the black wire from the gauge pod. To enable the dimming features on the gauges, remove any panels necessary for gaining access to the headlight switch wiring. Locate a wire that receives power when the headlights are turned on and attach a wire connector. Attach a wire connector to the end of the orange wire from the gauge pod and insert it into the connector on the headlight wire. Reinstall any panels that were removed. Reconnect the negative terminal on the battery and verify all wiring is correct. Power your gauge to ensure that everything is working properly by starting the vehicle. Check the transmission fluid level and add any fluid necessary for the fluid to return to the designated level. While the vehicle is running, cycle through the gears to help the fluid completely fill the transmission and recheck the fluid level. You've now successfully installed your GlowShift diesel gauge package into your truck. If you have any questions, concerns, or comments, please contact us at 1-888-GS-GAUGE, and we'll see you on the road.